Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Good afternoon, and welcome to WCAT Radio and this edition of Inter Vitam at Mortem, Between Life and Death, interviews and discussion with a Catholic bioethicist. I am your host, Dr. Anne Urlakis. I'm a classically trained and degreed bioethicist, and today I have with me a terrific guest, Leticia Velasquez. Leticia is a WCAT radio host of the program The Gospel of Life. Before we begin, let's start as we always do with a prayer in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Dear God, our Heavenly Creator, you are the author of life and of truth. The reality that you will each and every human person into being, created from the moment of conception, bearing the dignity and imprint of your own image and likeness within the very essence of our being, is a mystery beyond human understanding. Please help us to have a greater appreciation of the gift of being created in your image and likeness. Help us to reverence that reality in our brothers and sisters, especially in the tiniest and most vulnerable among them. And help us to defend the sanctity of every human life from conception to natural death. Through the intercession of Our Lady, the Blessed Virgin Mary, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. Again, thank you for tuning in to this episode of WCAT Radio's Inter Vitam et Mortem, Between Life and Death. Today, I have the joy of speaking with Leticia Velasquez. Leticia is the host of the WCAT program, The Gospel of Life, which airs on Sunday afternoons in the 4 p.m. Eastern time slot. And I've invited Leticia on the show in particular to focus on the subject of the Gospel of Life and its relevance to the resurrection. Today, as we celebrate Easter Monday, I can't think of anything that is more appropriate than looking at life in terms of the resurrection. Leticia is the author of the book, A Special Mother is Born. Parents share how God called them to the extraordinary vocation of parenting a special needs child, which has been published in multiple languages, I believe, 2011. She has worked, her work has been published in USA Today, Reuters, Chicago Sun-Times, National Catholic Register. I believe she is the co-founder of Kids Keep Infants with Down Syndrome, which advocates for the dignity of unborn children with Down syndrome in the media. She's been a guest on NPR and EWTN and so many other things. So welcome, Leticia. I'm delighted that you were able to accept my invitation to be a guest on this episode.
Thank you. It's an honor, Dr. Urlakis. I really respect your work as well. I'm the mom of 3 young women, 17, 21 and 25, and a 27 years wife to my husband Francisco. I have a master's degree in education, teaching English to speakers of other languages, and I learned Spanish just to prove that it's possible to learn another language, because I hadn't done so well in French after many years. I think it's the practice. But I've always been involved in pro-life ever since my 13 or 12-year-old 7th grade CCD class, which was all girls, and our 2 teachers, unmarried ladies, were pro-life, and they told us about a law that had been, a Supreme Court decision the year previous, that's how old I am, about abortion, and we were all aghast. We had no idea about abortion. This is the 70s. It was all new to young ladies that were pretty sheltered, and it just was a vocation for the rest of my life to be involved in bringing about the gospel of life. As a teenager, I started a pro-life club in my Catholic girls' high school, which is still around, by the way. Our Lady of Mercy Academy still has a Respect Life club. I know, that's one of my proudest legacies to have started that. And then I went to college, and I kind of just wanted to be accepted a little bit more, and I just wasn't as active. I didn't start a pro-life club in my college, and they don't have one to this day. It's Catholic college. I wish I had. But anyway, I went on to travel a bit and to find myself in the area of teaching, and I had been in social work, and I was always looking to do pro-life involvement from the Life Change. This is before 40 Days for Life. We held up signs along busy roadways to volunteering at crisis pregnancy centers, and now I find myself starting one. It's called A Pathways Pregnancy in Norwich, Connecticut, and it's half a block from Planned Parenthood abortion facility.
Wow.
So we're actually really busy soon. We just opened our doors about a month ago. We had a beautiful prayer service with Father Stephen Imperato he calls himself the protest priest, who himself, his girlfriend before, he's a late vocation. As a single man, he fathered 2 children that he was unaware of. They were twins, and his girlfriend did abort them. So he has a special gift to minister to women facing, the choice of abortion. Anyway, so I've been able to do that. And in 2002, going back a little bit, I had 2 children. I had a teaching job at a university. I was very happy. Life was good. But then I was homeschooling as well, so I went to a homeschooling convention. And if you've ever been to one of those, you know it's very tempting. You see dozens of beautiful little infants in arms, and you just say, oh, maybe I could have one more child. Yeah. So as soon as I got home, we were blessed, and my daughter Christina was born. I was pregnant with her through 9/11. It was a great comfort to be expecting a child in that terrible time.
I was too. I was due, right? I was Gemma Clara Faustina. I was born at the end of September. I was going through the same thing with you.
Wow. What a beautiful sign of hope. I know a woman who's actually laboring on 9/11, and she had a baby that will always be known to the local community. It's a 9/11 baby. But anyway, 8 of us, 8 of my homeschool friends and I, we started crisscrossing in hospital corridors when our babies were there within a month of each other. We had this huge shower together. So it was a beautiful sign of hope. My daughter, Christina, was born a month early because I had diabetes in pregnancy. But being 39 years old, I had refused prenatal testing. Of course, it was offered. This is New York. They're going to cover themselves and offer. And I said to the doctor very confidently, I'm a pro-lifer. If I can't face a baby with disabilities, then, I'm a hypocrite. I have to take whatever God sends. And I just thought that was the end of it. But about halfway through my pregnancy, I received a spiritual insight. It's the only way to describe it. I was at Mass by myself, and I saw a young lady with Down syndrome. We had a few houses in the community where people with Down syndrome would live in community. And a thought went through my mind, a voice actually was in my mind saying, you're going to have a child with Down syndrome. And I tried to dismiss it as hormones and, this is my imagination. Then I was going to communion, and the same voice spoke to me. I believe it was a man's voice, gentle but firm. I want you to accept this child as a gift from my hand when you receive me. I can't say that without a chill going down my spine because I recognize our Lord's voice. I was like, even then I couldn't just say, yes, Lord. I had to make a bargain. I'm a lawyer's daughter. Okay, Lord, just bring my husband along for the ride. I couldn't just say yes, Here I am getting an insight from the King of Kings, and I have to make a deal, right? So
you
I
and Abraham too. So you're good. You're in good
company
there.
I guess maybe there's a little Jewish roots back there somewhere that I said, listen, I'll make you a deal. So I made that deal, and I come home and I'm crying, and I told my mother, kind of burst out of me. You might think I'm crazy, but I think God just told me I'm going to have a child with Down syndrome. Well, my husband was coming down the stairs into the living room, and I think he missed a step at that point, and ended like, boom, falling down the stairs, like, oh, no, she's really lost it this time. Those hormones are hitting her hard. He'd been through a few pregnancies with me, so But it was true. And I had 4 months to feel sorry for myself. Why me? Why me? I'm not ready for this. And when Christina was born, they had to come get her a month early because of diabetes. They had no idea because I had prenatal testing for the health of the baby, but not to determine if the baby had anomalies, which was not very advanced in those days. All they had was a triple screen blood test, which was terribly unreliable.
Right.
It only had 30% reliability, and they didn't even develop the quad till after that. And then, of course, amnio, which has risk of miscarriage. Now, I had already miscarried 3 times, so there's no way I was risking it. I was so grateful to be that far along in my pregnancy. So I said no, no, and no. And then this insight, I still was having trouble accepting it, but it really did stay with me, so that when my daughter was born in a C-section and the entire operating theater went deathly silent, I was like, what? What's the matter? The baby looks fine. I saw her. And she was moving in pink, and no one was hovering over her. It turns out that she did have Down syndrome, and no one knew how to tell me.
Okay.
So the lady who was with me, a good friend who had 10 children, knew, but she didn't think it was her role. She saw the way the doctor was examining her. By the way, the pediatrician who examined my daughter, Dr. Roberta Nataloni, is head of Pediatricians for Life. And she has a Down syndrome grandson in Italy. And but we really didn't get to know each other because, unfortunately, when I went to her practice, there was another doctor that I got who was terrible, whom she admits it was terrible. But anyway, so when I went into the recovery room, they said something about testing. I was a little woozy. I wasn't out, but I still wasn't quite myself, you imagine.
I had 4 C-sections, I understand.
Yeah, you know, right? You're not quite there. And my husband said to me in Spanish, "Ella es una mongolita," and that's our old-fashioned term, mongoloid. And so the nurses took me out in a gurney. On the way to the room, they didn't even, tell me in the room. They said, "Your daughter has symptoms consistent with Down syndrome. We regret to inform you." I was like, geez, I was prepared for some really bad news. It's just that.
Exactly.
And they're looking at me like, aren't you going to be shocked? Oh, you didn't hear me, did you? And they kept watching me around the corners. It was really funny, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I wouldn't say that I was thrilled, but I had warning, and I just didn't feel like explaining that God told me this before. I just said, they're just going to think I'm nuts. Right. So I didn't. I guess I missed an opportunity. And the saddest thing is one of the nurses came into my room and told me, they can fix that. And I said, fix Down syndrome? Because, I don't think so. Yeah, they can do plastic surgery to make her look normal.
Oh, goodness.
I was flabbergasted. I say, it's like, yeah, your baby's ugly, but we can fix it, and what a horrible thing to say. It's just awful. And another nurse was yelling at me for not getting prenatal testing, and this is a Catholic hospital. And I got no one to come to me to help me deal with the diagnosis, and I even needed a nurse to help me lactate because I had nursed my other 2 babies, but I was having trouble. And Down syndrome babies are a little more challenging to nurse. And
you're a month early, almost.
I'm a month early, and I had diabetes, which also reduces your milk supply. None of this was being dealt with. All I was getting is negative feedback from the nurses. So it was really a horrible experience. So that nurse that was yelling at me for not getting testing, I said, I wouldn't have had an abortion, so what's the point? Right. And she refused to wheel me out. I was just, it was very ugly. But the good thing is I had wonderful Catholic friends who just flooded the hospital, and my relatives all came, and I was surrounded with love. When Christina was baptized on Mother's Day, 100 people came in the pouring rain, packed into the church. It was Mother's Day, too. They spent their Mother's Day at a baptism, and it was just beautiful. I hadn't
celebration of life. What a beautiful celebration of motherhood, and for you to later write the book about a special mother. I mean,
well, I started to realize with their reaction that this baby wasn't just for me, that she was a sign, like St. Pope John Paul says, a sign of contradiction.
Right.
That the beauty of the love of this child is something that flies in the face of society's image, like that nurse. You have to be perfect. You have to have your face fixed. Just having that baby is a gift to the world, not just to my family, but to the entire world, because it's teaching the world how to love. I think it's Rick Santorum calls his daughter Bella with trisomy 18, a professor of love. And from the very start, Christina was bringing people around her like that who were learning to love beyond their normal capacity, without any restrictions, without any, you have to earn it, you have to be, charming and smart and beautiful. And I think that's a lesson that the world sorely needs to learn now. We want children at our beck and call when it's time for them, when we're ready, and we want them to fulfill some of our needs. And, of course, the Lord is completely opposite that, and we know this in Holy Week and Easter. He's all about giving to us completely without reserve when we didn't deserve it, while we were still sinners. And but I took very seriously that he had said to me that Christina was a gift. So even though, yes, there was a certain moments that I got discouraged, like when I looked at my daughter in the nursery and the other children were more vibrant. She was very low tone, of course, muscle tone. She was very quiet. She barely made any noise. She never cried. Very easy baby, actually. Fell asleep all the time, even while nursing. She had to wake her up and keep her going. My first baby was colicky, so this is a far cry from having a baby screaming 4 hours a day. But you have to remember to feed her. But she caught on, and she nursed eventually when I got my milk started, and did have colic. Jaundice. We did have to spend a day in the hospital, but that's nothing major. A lot of babies have that. She had a small hole in her heart, 2 millimeters, which in 6 months we were out of the cardiologist. It had healed. So we had no major physical problems other than
that was
Down
one of my
syndrome
questions. I was going to ask. Were there any Downs can come with some physical problems, that PFO, the patent foraminal valley. Were there any of those? And as you have just given birth, you're well aware that there can be those issues, and yet none of those nurses came in to say, hey, there are these issues, but they can all be dealt with medically.
No, it was horrible. And it is on my bucket list to go back there and to talk to, I guess, the chaplain's office or something and say, let's do an in-service here, okay, because that was horrible. They were more afraid of me than willing to help me, and the only two that decided to help were negative. It was horrific. They never sent the chaplain in. There was no reaching out, and the only information they gave me was the phone number for the county where I could get the birth to 3 or the early intervention program. And, all right, that was helpful. That was probably by law. But no one came to describe it to me, to say how it works. And it was 2 years into the program before I realized I was entitled to an advocate for free to help me get the most out of the program. And I'm like, gee, thanks, someone to help me get more services. For example, they were putting off giving my daughter speech therapy, and because she's a good nurser, and breastfeeding is very good for babies with Down syndrome because they have to suck harder, and they're building their mouth muscles. They're strengthening which helps them articulate. Articulation is one of the problems with Down syndrome because they have a looser, sometimes they have a larger tongue and low muscle tone, so they're speaking a little bit less distinctly, and that's one of the issues that we're still working with. She's 17 now, and has had no major health problems. She does have psoriasis. We went through a time in her schooling when she was very stressed out. It turns out the school district in a small country town had guided her into an autism program because we have to make it fit. We don't have money for a Down syndrome program. And it wasn't the right fit, but they were trying to make it fit. She didn't want to go to school. I was literally dragging her to school every day in 3rd and 4th and 5th grade. And finally I said, I've got to do something. And I homeschooled her for a couple of years. And then we tried high school, and that didn't work. Now I have an agreement with my district, and they're helping us with the therapy costs. There is actually, just as an aside, there's actually in the law of Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that parents are entitled to choose a private school of their own choosing, even a religious school, and the district has to pay for it. Good luck getting that done, but that is in the law, so just a little aside. Took me, 10 years to get to it. But we even moved from Long Island to Connecticut because Connecticut had inclusive education by law, and New York didn't. And it helped. It helped up to about 3rd grade. She was very happy. But what happens with kids with Down syndrome that they start falling behind a little faster as the kids accelerate, as they begin to read well and do more math. They fall behind. So from our point of view, that became an issue because, and also kids getting 4th and 5th grade is getting towards middle school. They're a little more embarrassed of somebody who's different, and they're less accepting. They're very uncomfortable in their own skins. Right. So they had accepted Christina, and then things were getting a little more uncomfortable. And then we found out she does have a malformation in her cervical spine, not the typical lanceolateral instability that Down syndrome has, but something that could cause a very severe injury if she should fall. So we had to take her off the playscape, and that was heartbreaking for her. That was her way of communicating. Her verbal abilities were not great, but she could do follow the leader, and she just loved being the star of that. So to take that away from her was almost like tying an Italian's hands down. She couldn't talk. She couldn't communicate. She couldn't interact, and that's when she started to hate school, that and the autism program. So that's our biggest challenge, I think, is her lack of ability to speak. She went backwards in 3rd grade, and that was very depressing, and she got psoriasis, and that turned into arthritis. So we had a lot of challenges. Yeah, so imagine, an 11-year-old with arthritis. So now she has to take injections for that. Luckily, I have a daughter who's a nurse. And that's another beautiful thing. We homeschooled so that when my littlest one was getting the early intervention, physical therapy, occupational therapy in the house, her sisters were watching. So as soon as the therapist left, what did? They played therapist. And they were rehearsing all the exercises she had done, all the games, and they learned that they liked doing helping people. So both of them are nurses, and it's wonderful to know. Isn't that great? And it's because of the interaction, because they saw it, and because they were inspired by her and how everything is a struggle for her, but it makes her into a fighter. Sometimes she fights against you, of course, but she fights because nothing comes easily to these kids. You don't take it for granted. She didn't walk till she was 2.5, but what a triumph that was, you know.
And each of her sisters,
and every word she says is a celebration.
Oh, I bet.
Pardon?
I bet. Each of her sisters could see themselves in those roles.
That's right.
They respected the therapist who came in,
teaching.
and yes, that is absolutely beautiful. And then, you know, that giving, that love just keeps on giving because now they're doing the same
they're
thing
teaching her
better.
to love. They're teaching her not to judge other people by their appearance. In fact, if we see another kid with Down syndrome, we're instant family with them in the grocery store or wherever. My daughters are all always, oh, here we go. Mom's going to go over there, make new friend. We won't get anywhere for an hour now. And it's beautiful. It's created a community for us, so we didn't think that we would have one. And it's also created, like I said, a greater acceptance of people that you may not want to connect with, you may be shy about. And now we don't see the disability, we see the person more. I wish all of society were like that. Just see the person, you know, not whatever is different about them. And so it has been, it's been an experience where we're learning to give, we're learning to accept, and we're learning to have our lives interrupted. And I think that's a good thing because our Lord often interrupts our lives. He often asks us to give more and to extend ourselves. And there's nothing like a kid with special needs to teach you that you're not your own. And you need to do that. And I think that's exactly why people are afraid of it. And why people, you know, are afraid of the Lord in general because, oh, he's going to ask me to be a missionary in Africa. I just know it. Well, not tomorrow.
Right.
But he may be working on you to go in that direction. And my eldest daughter was a missionary to Ecuador. She took a group of nurses and doctors from Franciscan University into the Amazon.
Wow.
Twice. And set up missions in the middle of the Amazon. I mean, I'm just in awe of that. But I think that came from having a sister that stretched your capabilities of you know, patience and love and endurance. And these are all good things. They're sometimes painful, like I just did some exercise and realized how out of shape I am. But little by little, as I do it more and more, it's going to seem easier. And the spiritual life, I think that's the one area where most people they don't want to do that, you know. So our beautiful daughter with Down syndrome is an instructor in love, and she teaches you little by little how to give more and not count the cost. And I'm more of the person I wanted to be, much more than I was 17 years ago. You know, it's funny because I was thinking of going to special ed with my master's, and I spent one day in a special ed school, and I actually enjoyed it. But then the teacher came up to me and she said, you know, everything you just taught them today, they're going to forget it by tomorrow.
Oh, how frustrating.
And I thought to myself, I was like, well, you need to change schools, lady. You are burned out.
Oh, how frustrating.
And it's hard if you don't have a spiritual life. I know. Well, needless to say, I thought, oh, I guess I don't have the patience for special needs. And God just laughed. Just wait.
Yeah.
Just you wait. I got something planned for you. So that's like I said, he's not going to tell you to go to Africa tomorrow. But if he wants you to go, it's going to become the thing that you can do and you love doing. And I love having my daughter with special needs. I have difficult days, but I don't, as I said to the nurses when she was born, I'm not going to have a teenager that's going to go out and get on drugs and get in trouble with the law, come home pregnant. I mean, there's a lot of things I'm not going to have to worry about, crash the car up. There's other teenage issues we have. She definitely has attitude some days, wants to be left alone. We share a bedroom because she's got some issues with mucus, and I want to make sure her airways are clear. I don't have to suction her, but she needs to be turned in bed sometimes. She's a little bit of an apnea. And so sometimes she's like, oh, I have to share my bedroom with my mother. We took 2 bedrooms and we made them into one, so we kind of each have our own little corner. But she still has that, get out of my room, Ma.
Sure.
So there's a lot of typical, action. And the great thing is I found a speech therapist who is just working wonders with her. we come out with new words every day. Today we said, "Here's your rice," a complete sentence out of nowhere, where there, are very little words. And so I never give up hope that she can get better and better. And I'm also seeing society change in terms of accepting those with Down syndrome. In 2002, my father downloaded a lot of information about Down syndrome off the computer, didn't read it, and handed it to me, and it was horrifying. It was all about how to abort, how to discover and abort a child with Down syndrome. Now, thanks to kids, Keep Infants with Down syndrome, and many other groups out there, there's a lot more positive things about Down syndrome, and you see people with Down syndrome doing all kind of wonderful things, getting married, swimming Lake Tahoe. I met Karen Gaffney, a lady with Down syndrome who swam Lake Tahoe, man. She swam the English Channel, not all by herself. She did it in teams, but still, I can't swim the length of an Olympic swimming pool, And she has Down syndrome. So it was amazing. She was the headliner at a conference, a pro-life conference at Yale, of all places.
Wow.
So that was an amazing achievement you wouldn't have seen in 2002.
That's
true.
What
I mean. Parents are making a big difference with books like A Special Mother is Born, with social media, YouTube, and all kinds of wonderful efforts that are being made all around the world. I have a good friend, Mike Sullivan, in New Zealand. I hope I meet him someday. He's advocating for the right of children with Down syndrome to be born in New Zealand, where they have national health care, which is always an issue. National health care, they want to save costs, and you can't blame them, but what they do is they pay for the non-invasive prenatal testing, which takes place around 10 weeks, which is a blood test. But it's much more accurate than the old triple screens. They actually count the baby's chromosomes, which are in your blood. We didn't know that back then. And they say they have a 99% accuracy rate. So they're being paid for and encouraged by these national healthcare systems. And then, like Iceland, that says it wants to have a 0% birth rate of babies with Down syndrome, they're working towards those sort of statistics. Denmark is bragging about that,
Denmark,
too.
Right.
So at the same time society is accepting them, society is also reaching around to destroy them before birth. So it gets very depressing sometimes, the disconnect there, Don't have this child. But if you have this child, they're wonderful and they can do anything. So it's like, which is it?
And in destroying these children, we are destroying a part of ourselves. We are destroying our own humanity. Right. We are becoming less human with every child that is destroyed. It is horrific. Don't get me started on that one. Because they don't judge others. They're very open to others. They don't understand, in most cases, this person's more important to you. They have more money. They have more education. They're like, it's another human being. And I'm just going to reach out to them like I would my mother. And so they're not a respecter of persons in a good way. And they can be very outgoing. Christina can be. She'll walk up to some complete stranger and give them a hug. Sometimes you got to watch that. But sometimes it's a good thing. It's usually the person in the room that's the least comfortable with her. It's funny. Oh, that's fabulous.
And there's just I used to have a cat like that. He would cuddle up on the lap of the person who was allergic to cats. Well, Christine will find the person who's like the most like looking at her funny, and I guess that's the one she wants to warm up to her. And it's uncanny sometimes her sensitivity to others, even if she hasn't met them before. But now she's just a regular part of the community. She was very well known in school, mostly because she pulled a fire alarm in kindergarten.
Oh.
She's like, what's this shiny red lever, and why is it at eye level? And I asked myself the same question. Couldn't you put it up higher? But, she was very popular from doing that.
I have a daughter who's tried to set the school on fire by not putting water in the macaroni and cheese when she put it in the microwave, I came to teach later that afternoon, and I could smell the burning smell from outside the school. Walked in the door, had several people say, guess what your princess did? And then we had a Mass in the Extraordinary form later that afternoon at the Basilica. So all the kids end up at the Basilica. The canon is there for the Mass, and I can see him up there in the sanctuary sniffing. And I realized...
We can smell in the Basilica?
It is because all of these kids brought the smell of burning macaroni and cheese
in their
their hair, their clothes, everything. So the entire basilica smells like burnt macaroni and cheese, and it's my princess.
Oh, that's a memory you'll keep.
She's done it 3 times. At this point, she'd be banned
funny.
from the microwave.
That's too funny.
Princess who tried to cut the hair of another student, the daughter of a teacher. In first grade. The hair's laying, we can talk about reactive attachment disorder at some point, and that is the hair's laying on the floor, the scissors are in her hand. Did you cut this child's hair? No, I didn't do it.
Nope.
But the scissors are in your hand. She must have put them there. Okay.
Oh, really? That's a good one. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, it can be very humbling. Yeah, to be the mother of the kid who will knock everybody's coffee over when you're at a coffee class, or throw the sugar across the room to see how far it will fly. It keeps you on your toes, and it keeps you from being too confident in yourself.
It does.
Too cocky,
it does. Exactly. You look at it, and you never know what's going to come out of, but it is incredibly humbling.
Mm-hmm.
We have special needs in a different way. I've mentioned reactive attachment disorder before.
Yes.
And we have a different set of special needs. But as a mom, it is your life. It is your vocation. You love these kids immensely. And you realize that with every one of these that they pull that are incredibly humbling, that, as our Lord is chiseling the stone that is you, or molding the clay that is you, one or the other, He's also doing the same thing for everyone around you. And it's part of their formation process, too. And you just stand back and say, okay, God, thank you.
My daughters, are very conscious of the fact they can be embarrassed in front of strangers, and I'm very uncomfortable for them, particularly when something like that happens.
Sure.
But then again, it also gives other people the opportunity to reach out to you who might not have said anything. And be awfully nice. I've had all these people offer me help at times like this. Clean up after her, say it's nothing, help me get her out the door, or whatever, that just reach out in a beautiful way. I mean, it's not always beautiful. There's some people that are not as kind. But God is giving them an opportunity, too, to help me. And for me, who has grown up in a culture where you do everything yourself, I have to accept the help and give them the opportunity to serve me, complete strangers. And it's usually a beautiful experience. It's been a learning curve to accept that help, right? I'm a teacher. I can control a classroom, but I can't control my own daughter sometimes.
Exactly.
So then that experience of being helped is also something that I have appreciated very much, and I'll never forget it. And it happens almost every day. From the therapists that help her every day to the people in the public that are so, most of the time, very understanding. It helps that Christina has Down syndrome. They can see she's got a disability. I feel for parents maybe like you, or the parent of a child with autism that looks normal but then doesn't act normal, because sometimes the parents will look at you like, what's wrong with your kid?
What's wrong?
You obviously didn't raise this child right. And with Down syndrome, most people understand that there are behavioral challenges, although some don't. I get this whole they're all angels stuff. I'm like, yeah, okay. Spend 24 hours with us and see if you still feel that way.
It is a challenge. On the other end of the age spectrum, I took care of my mom with her Alzheimer's, and I remember taking her into grocery stores and holding her hand, walking her up to communion and holding her hand so she wouldn't get lost. And the knowing that as we walk down the aisle, she is going to take every toothbrush that she can see in the toothpaste aisle and either put them in her pocket or do something, because that week she was fixated on toothbrushes. And as you say, there are those who will encounter you and will treat you with kindness in ways that you didn't expect. There are others who will treat you with pity or disgust. And you think about our Lord, and this past week, Good Friday, the walking the Via Dolorosa and the falls, and the same thing. Clearly there were the eyes of those who loved him, who met him and knew that they could not do anything other than Veronica wiping his face. There were others who were spitting and their eyes were full of disgust. And you meet those glances, and it's like, okay, Lord, you're giving me the chance to carry this cross, and this is a privilege. It's hard to accept at times, but it's a privilege.
Well, gifts from his hand are not always comfortable, but they're gifts nonetheless. And it is exactly that a friend of mine noticed when she wrote a story about her son with autism, and she said he's a child like no other. He's unique in his autism and his challenges and all that. And Our Lady had a child like no other, in the truest sense. There never was a child like Jesus, and there never will be again.
That's a really good reflection.
Yeah, well, I'm looking it up. I wrote a quick reflection on that. One day I took my daughter to a concert, which are always challenging. You never know if she's going to stay or she wanted to be at this concert or things are going to go flying. So I was grateful when she fell asleep. It was a religious concert with a bunch of nuns, so I didn't want anything to go flying towards the nuns, and I was very grateful when she settled down. And I thought about what it's like to have a child like no other. And I said, Mary, could you teach me, it was a Marian concert, what it means to have a child with like no other, and how that might be introduced to thinking about your son, you know. So here's the reflection I came up with. It's short. In honor of Holy Week, I'll read it. Mary bore a child like no other, a child who did not conform to society's expectations. He was different from the others. He gazed upon heaven when the rest could only see clouds. He reminded them of their failings, their lack of charity, their shallowness, their impatience, and their rush to judgment. His government tried to kill him and eventually succeeded. He had to endure constant misunderstanding of what he was trying to communicate and bore the frustration of those who misunderstood him. He was mocked and rejected, and at times it seemed only his mother still stood by him. She felt the loneliness of seeing her son rejected because he was different, yet she bore the pain patiently because she knew that it was for us, the least of these, that he suffered and died. Our Lady knew that all her special children would, like her son, be signs of contradiction in the world. Because of this, I believe she asked her son for extraordinary graces for them. These allow our children to see his face directly, free of the veil which clouds our vision, since most of our children are incapable of offending God. She, being a mother of mothers, knew that by mothering them, we would be offered rare but dazzling glimpses of the pure love of Jesus, to sustain us when the darkness of this world threatens to overtake us, and to remind us that in heaven our children will be healed of their infirmities and wholly appreciated for the gifts they possess, unfathomable spiritual beauty. They and we will be home. There have been times that my daughter just had dazzling spiritual insights that just blew me away. The most moving was when my mother was diagnosed suddenly with terminal stage 4 widespread cancer, the kind where they just sew you back up and wish you well. And I got that phone call right after Mother's Day in 2009, and I had just moved into a new house in the forest, and I just gazed out into the woods, sat down on the front porch. I just couldn't move. You know, I couldn't pray. I was just absolutely dazed. And my little 7-year-old, who I was wondering if she understood what prayer was, we were contemplating First Communion, marched over to the statue of Our Lady, where we never prayed outside, knelt down, did the sign of the cross, left-handed, of course, and started talking to Jesus in, you know, broken words here and there, Mommy, Daddy, Grandma. And she kept her hands clasped, and she kept looking up at Our Lady's face with this look of concentration. Like, you getting this? Okay, then she looked down again. And then when she was done, she made a sign of the cross, stood up, put her arm around the statue like John Paul in the Holy Huddle with Our Lady of Fatima, if you've ever seen that picture.
Yes.
It's just like that. Like, okay, I'm good now because you have this, right? Mary, you got this, right? You got my problems. Okay, and then just marched off happy as could be. And I took all these pictures because I was just stunned. I'd never seen her pray. I mean, she prayed with me. But how do you explain prayer to a child that you're not sure if she can understand the concept of talking to God and Our Lady and Jesus? And she got it. She led my entire family into giving my mother back to God, which happened 4 months later. But my dad thought there'd be a miracle because that was so extraordinary, and there was. There was a miracle.
There was a miracle, not the one that was.
And she had a beautiful death on a Friday, right at the hour of mercy, surrounded by family, having had the sacraments and communion her last day of life, and it was beautiful. But because the child led us, the child who we didn't even know if she knew who God was, taught us all. This is what you do. You put your loved one in Mary's hands, and then you relax because she's got her, and she's going home. And so things like that just sustain you through the difficult times of the fire alarms. And, the time she wouldn't leave the pizza parlor because she wanted another slice, and I had to carry her out, and things like that. But something like that reminds you of the beauty in her soul because of the purity of her heart. And it makes you want to be like her, that complete trust.
That is incredible.
Because when she saw my mom in the funeral home, she touched her to wake her up. I said, "No, Grandma went to be with Jesus," and she nodded like, "Oh yeah, I remember. Okay," and just complete acceptance. It was beautiful. It was really, really beautiful.
I have another friend who has a daughter who is severely, severely autistic, and her speech is labored, and yet she converses with the angels. And when both grandparents were dying and no one knew it, she announced to the family that Grandma so-and-so is going to die. Oh, no, she's fine. Well, she died that weekend. And a month later, she said, and Grandpa is going to go join her. And people began to listen. Wow. And he did.
I would have at that point.
The angels told her, and they've seen her looking at the ceiling with a glorious look on her face, conversing with the angels. It is
isn't that
incredible.
Beautiful?
It is beautiful. As you say, the purity. These children can't offend God in any way, and they have so much to teach us. They really do. The veil between eternity and time is so very flimsy, and for them, they can see right through it at times that we can't.
Yes. You show us the way.
They do. They absolutely show us the way. One of the themes that I've had on this program through each of the interviews has been that of discernment, of putting yourself in God's hands and just what it's meant. Vicki Thorne, so many of the people that have talked on here, Father Jacob Boddicker, have all talked about my life has had more twists and turns than a corkscrew. And it's, holding on for the ride. And I see that in your story, too, especially with Christina, with your daughter, how this is not what you anticipated, but there has been this total openness to, okay, God, it's not like you didn't tell me what was going to go on. You let me know ahead of time. Thank you. And here we go. And just that absolute trust that both you and she have. Can you say more to that? Can you say more about that feeling of trust and how you've allowed that to play out in your life?
Well, first it was sort of forced out of me. You have this child with all these disabilities and you don't feel up to it. You're quickly reading to catch up with it and availing yourself of all the wonderful services. But as you see them develop little by little and you realize that somehow God is giving you the grace you need. Now, you have to stay in a state of grace. It's not, it's a free gift, but you have to nurture your spiritual life and go to Mass and pray and all that. But you're seeing that somehow the patience and the knowledge and all that is coming. It's not, you're not left completely alone and abandoned. You feel that God did call me to this. And in a special sense, I didn't mention this, I always wanted to be a writer. And I had this premonition as a young person, well, nobody wants to hear a 17-year-old. You really have to have some life under your belt. So I went to Europe and I started to write there, and nobody wanted to hear what I had to say. I guess I don't have enough depth to me. Well, once I had a child with special needs, I had to write. Because when I found out that, 67 to 90% of them are aborted when the Down syndrome is diagnosed before birth in the United States, and it's much higher in Europe, I said, somebody's got to say something. And none of the doctors in my area wanted to hear from me. I offered myself as a counselor, just a peer counselor, like one of the mothers in my parish had been. Nope, they didn't want to, just keep my name in case you get a mom with a baby and Down syndrome or expecting, and nobody took me up on it. So then I turned to the Internet and I started a blog in 2006, and I found my voice, and that worked its way into articles in the Catholic Register, and then all the other articles, and then a book. Because so many people responded to my first article, A Special Mother is Born. They wanted to tell their stories. And I said, these are stories that need to be told. That if God can ask so much of a mother, he must be giving the grace. You know, he doesn't cold equips, he equips the called. He certainly does. And I want that story to be told so that a mother is expecting a baby with special needs and feels inadequate, as I did, sees, oh, well, look, this woman felt the same way, and God came through for her. Because, you know, the God that asks much of us is ready to give much to us at the same time. And to just share that sense of trust with these other mothers so that are expecting, that are in that scared phase, that why me phase that we all go through, and say, this is what I've experienced, and this is my story. And that really opened up my writing and my outreach to the world, really. I was always in pro-life, but this opened up a whole new avenue, and I'm so grateful to God for the opportunity to share the beauty of that she's brought in our lives. And
I've seen the book on Amazon. I've seen the book on Amazon. And is there any place else that folks can pick up the book? I've also seen that it is available. It's been reprinted in what languages now?
Spanish. In Spanish. I had a friend who wrote for the Catholic Herald in Francis, and she has a daughter with Down syndrome, and she happened to know a lady in Madrid for as a publisher. It doesn't matter. And I offered the book for free because I hadn't written most of it. It was written by my 32 friends and I. I edited it, and I got the stories, you know, tightened up, and I wrote a foreword and a couple of articles after. But it was really their stories, and I said, I just want to make this book as cheap as possible. Real is the name of the publisher in Spain. But again, Ha nacido una madre especial, a special mother is born in Spanish. So it's available in both languages, and the price has gone down. It was a little bit hefty in the beginning. It was $20. I think it's gone way down. But I want to make it available to anyone who's dealing with a situation in their lives, who has a relative who's dealing with it, so they know they're not alone. That was what happened on the Internet in the beginning, that you saw they call them termination sites. Like if you go on a baby center website and everyone's sharing their joy about pregnancy, a new baby, and then they have this section for Down syndrome, it's all about, I aborted my child with Down syndrome and I feel fine about it. That's all they had in the beginning. Now you can find many, many beautiful groups and pages and whatnot to support you. This is one thing that parents have done in Christina's lifetime, and thank God for that, because I really feel for those mothers before that had nowhere to turn. Their medical providers are not able to handle it. Their friends, sometimes, if they don't have a strong faith life, they sort of leave them high and dry. So no wonder they don't want to trust. Who are they going to trust, you know?
Right.
They don't know our Lord. They don't have a relationship with Him. So where is that trust going to come from? I knew that God had brought me through many other things in my life. This seemed a bit daunting, but little by little I saw that He was giving me what I needed to accept it, and my family too. For some of the family members, it was a challenge. People have preconceived notions of what life is supposed to be like, and my daughter's pretty much changed a lot of them and wound her way into everybody's heart.
Just the way that you have been able to touch so many folks. And I do encourage people to get this book, to give it to pregnancy help centers like the one that you started, to put it in the back of your parish, to put it in the parish
offer to your pastor in case he's counseling somebody. You know,
that was my next question.
For me.
Perfect segue into my next question. I always, because we are part of Holy Apostles, I always ask for men in formation, having a son who's in formation and lots of friends who are seminarians and priests. What advice specifically do you have for men in formation or for religious, for priests, for sisters who are going to be counseling folks, who are going to have people show up on their doorstep after having a diagnosis that they're not prepared for? What piece of advice would you give them?
Well, besides giving them my book, and I know it sounds self-serving, but I created it to be sort of a manual for someone who doesn't know what to say. Well, I don't have experience with this, but these people do. So that's the easy answer. And the other answer, I actually spent time on the campus of Princeton, had a Down syndrome conference the year my book came out, and I met this gentleman who works with the Witherspoon Institute, but there's an institute down there that trains doctors. And how they train doctors is each doctor resident, I believe, spends one day a year with a family with a child with special needs. And they learn so much that you cannot learn from textbooks. They learn so much empathy, and they learn what daily life is like.
That's a terrific idea. if we could
so
have
just by observing. So I would say the seminary rectors find team up with some parents with special needs. Ask if a seminarian can just spend a day with you, playing with the kid, eating dinner, seeing what going to bed and getting up or whatever is like, so they can have a concept of that in their minds, so they're not coming out of left field, and they won't be able to say they've been there necessarily, but they've observed it, and I think that'll take some of the awkwardness out of it. And make them more comfortable with somebody with special needs.
A great school of faith there to see how a family copes with it, how they deal with it, and have them speak to them honestly about it, and also to develop, maybe one or two people that could talk to someone in case you're a priest and you run into that situation. It's always good to have that sort of person available. In the pregnancy center, we had a young woman who was expecting a child. Who was overweight, and her doctor told her the child was going to have Downs because she was heavy, which I've never heard anywhere as a factor. So she was terrified. She was only 19, and she was thinking of abortion. And so I was able to come alongside her and to reassure her that even if it were Down syndrome and there were no definitive diagnosis, it was just a hunch she had, which is very irresponsible in my opinion, that it would be okay. And she had the baby, and she's perfectly healthy. In fact, she's so beautiful, she's a model right now. And even children with Down syndrome are models. There's young ladies who are models becoming world famous.
The Gerber baby this time around.
That's right, has Down syndrome. And there's a swimsuit model manufacturer from Spain that has this one girl who's her Down syndrome, a beautiful young lady. So, even having Down syndrome doesn't preclude being a model. But, this poor girl was intimidated. And unfortunately, some people in the medical profession impose this view that that life will be extremely limited. They need to update their information. And that's why I met with this lady in Los Angeles who actually finds roles for people with Down syndrome in movies, including her own son. Because she said the more you can have somebody just in normal life, not a movie about Down syndrome, but somebody in Down syndrome in a coffee shop who serves the coffee, and think nothing of it, then that will be a better society where we don't have to overcompensate either. We just, so they have Down syndrome. Like in the beginning of integration, they're a different color. Big deal. We don't have to make a big deal out of this. And I think that's starting to happen a little bit, and I think we're seeing people less terrified of having a child with Down syndrome than they used to be. Don't forget, in the old days, they used to put them in institutions.
As you mentioned earlier in the program, there seems to be a real polarization. On one end of the spectrum, you have the Denmark, the countries, including our own at times, where you have this push to have children who are created differently, either aborted or put in the shadows. And then on the other hand, you have a more welcoming and more embracing. There is an absolute black and whiteness about it. There is a polarity there. And the tension that comes with that polarity, unfortunately. I have an individual that I know who, at her scan, she was told that there were 6 cysts in her unborn child's brain, and that those cysts were absolutely indicative of Down syndrome, and the physician was urging her to abort. She said no, she wanted a second opinion. The physician was irate. I'm married to a physician. We've both talked about just how outrageous this is. She tried to find another physician in the same medical group who would take her insurance. This physician had contacted everyone within the same vicinity and urged them not to see this woman, saying that she was a religious nut. She ended up going someplace else, and outside of her system, follow-up ultrasound, no evidence of cysts, beautiful baby boy who is now, I think, 12 years old. This is an older story. But everything was fine. But again, that push, this physician was, again, gut feeling, I think there's something wrong, and paternalistically pushing this person into an abortion. And thank heaven she refused. There are those stories out there.
I hope she went back to him with her son, but I doubt she even wanted to see him again. But,
no.
Part of me wants to go back with my daughter to the hospital and say, yes, she's Down syndrome. You want to hear what her life is like? Because you need to hear this before you march into another mother of a newborn's room and suggest plastic surgery. This is horrible. The medical profession. I mean, we have a wonderful pediatrician, Dr. Brian Scottco, up here in Mass General, who goes around the world talking to physicians about how to give the Down syndrome diagnosis and educating, medical students. And it's very encouraging that Dr. Scottco is trying to change his profession about that. He did a landmark article in the Journal of American Medical Genetics. Very interesting. The week my book came out, his research came out. And at the same time, non-invasive prenatal testing came out. I didn't plan this. I've been trying to get the book out for 3 years. Frustrated, pushing. Lord, what's the problem? Well, the problem is he wanted it that week in October because Maternity T21, which is the first non-invasive prenatal test, came out that week. Dr. Scottco had timed his research for that week, and I just blundered into it with the help of God, having my book published that week. These are things that can't happen.
Those are God moments, right? Exactly.
Yeah, it's a God moment for sure. And anyway, his research said he had done a survey of 300 families with children with Down syndrome. 99% of parents of children with Down syndrome were happy with their child. 99%. And 99% of people with Down syndrome were happy with who they were.
Who they are.
Yeah, who they are. And the siblings were really low. They were only 97% said they're better people because of their sibling with Down syndrome. So Dr. Scottco's sister has Down syndrome, so he's motivated for this research. And he's examining Christine, and he's put my book in both languages in his library, and he's spreading it around. He's doing a wonderful job of changing the ideas of what life is like with Down syndrome. But see, that came out, and that really inspired a lot of people, because that's a fact. And maybe not what you're looking for, but when you trust God and you allow Him to work in your life, the beauty is unmistakable, and it's made us definitely a better family. And I definitely would offer that support to anyone that wanted to contact me through my Facebook and all that. I would be happy to support them. So we go to the March for Life every year. Kids, keep him with Down syndrome, marching parents and children with Down syndrome, with a group called Order of the Alhambra. It's a Catholic fraternal organization that specializes in people with special needs and supporting them. And they come with us and they support us, and we march, and we meet with Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rogers, who had a son with Down syndrome in office. In fact, I think she was the Congresswoman, beautiful pro-life Congresswoman from Washington State, who's been pregnant in Congress more than anybody else. She's had 3 children in Congress. Beautiful woman, very pro-life, very gentle, and she's brought her son Cole to our meetings. I believe he's in middle school now, but he was in preschool at the time, and has worked with us, and we've worked with her to help increase. She started the Congressional Down Syndrome Caucus, so we've made a lot of progress in encouraging, like I said, National Institutes of Health to increase Down syndrome funding for research. And we conducted a seminar in Family Research Council down in D.C. on prenatal testing, and talking about the wonderful advances in Down syndrome research. They've been able to quiet the 21st chromosome over here in University of Massachusetts, in Petri dish, of course. It's a long way from being done in people. But I believe they tie it up with the virus. That's the only way I can think of to describe it. Keep it busy so it doesn't cause trouble. Like a troublesome kid in your classroom, you give them a toy. Keep them busy. And they've been able to find links between Down syndrome and Alzheimer's.
Sure.
Almost everybody with Down syndrome gets Alzheimer's, so maybe there's something on the 21st chromosome that could lead to some important research. There is some research being done right now. MIT just got a $29 million grant from a Brazilian family who have a daughter with Down to do Down syndrome and research in cognition and Alzheimer's. Yeah, so that could lead to a breakthrough for Alzheimer's in general, and that's certainly a great help to the population. So if we had done this research, instead of focusing on prenatal testing, we might have saved a lot of different diseases. Do you know people with Down syndrome don't get cancer? They don't get solid tumors. We have found that Down syndrome is a disease of superimmunity. They have, I think it's 12 more proteins than other people, 50% more, 12 more proteins that are involved with the immune system. That's why they get things like psoriasis, because their immune system is overactive. But it also keeps them from getting solid cancer tumors. Well, maybe we can harness that and figure out what do they have.
They don't seem to get the embryonic tumors like osteosarcoma either, is my understanding. So there is a definite. We've talked about the early diagnosis and you were given a early warning from God, which in that sense was helpful. But I look at that none of my children, I opted not to have any of the prenatal diagnosis either. And I had problem pregnancies. I had one that was a complete previa. I had another that was leaking amniotic fluid from the 4th month on. Each one of my pregnancies, the complete previa was a life-threatening issue for both she and I. And I told my obstetrician, put it in writing. I'm a bioethicist. If it comes to it, if there is a decision to be made in the delivery room, baby lives, I don't. If it comes down to that, put it in writing. I want it in the chart.
God bless you.
When I look at that prenatal diagnosis, I was born without hip sockets and with a spina bifida occulta. If my mom had, I know my mom would have had me, good Catholic lady, but I don't know that she would have been able to battle with the physicians if they were pushing her. And when you look at the neural tube defect that I was born with, I was in a spica cast for the first 18 months of my life while my hip sockets were forming, and that spina bifida occulta. If that test had come back positive with there's going to be a neural tube defect, we just don't know what extent it's going to be. What that could have done. I am so glad I am here, and in some ways it's probably part of my fight for the sanctity of life for every human person. Maybe that's why God put me here. As we sit here, and we're getting to the end of our hour here, as we sit here on Easter Monday and we look at the resurrection and the sanctity of life and the life that we all share in God that will extend into eternity, the one thing that comes back to me over and over is that you can't write the end of the story. With each of these children that's born, each of these children from the moment of its conception, there is no one who can look in there with an ultrasound and say, we know what is going to happen with this child. Only God can write the end of the story, like he did at the resurrection. It wasn't the end of the story that anyone anticipated on that Easter morning, and his plans are far more glorious for all eternity than we can even imagine. Leticia, it has been a joy. This has gone way too fast. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share with my listeners such a wealth of information. I encourage my listeners to get a copy of your book and to get 2 copies of your book, to get a copy of your book for their own bookshelf and to get a copy of that book to pass on to somebody, to leave it in the back of the parish, to leave it someplace, to pass it on to somebody who needs it, because there is such hope in the message that you have. You've been able to help so many people. Thank God for all you're doing. And thank you for being a guest here on Inter Vitam at Mortem, WCAT.
My pleasure.
Wishing you
so
and
much.
Yours a blessed Easter week, too. Thank you again. God bless you.
God bless you, too. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.